Hi guys, welcome to another art video. In this video I'll be using watercolors, gouache, inks, and color pencils. The main ingredient is still watercolor, and I list all the materials that I use in the description down below in case you want to check it out. I know I'm always curious to see what other people use, so it's all right there if you want to check it out. So for this piece I tried to approach it a little bit differently from my usual process. If you are familiar with the other works that I do, I typically have very line-heavy line art. I usually plan out everything in the sketch, so when I start the line art I don't have to figure out anything anymore. My outlines are quite defined, so every flower will have each petal lined and small details will be outlined like jewelry or patterns. There's not a lot of abstraction, and I think that's something that comes natural to me, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, I'm also often inspired by much looser styles that have abstract elements or heavy brush strokes, and I just can't seem to wrap my brain around it. So for this piece I had the idea to try and be a bit more loose with the painting. So I had the sketch with only the face pretty much defined. She's going to have a hood with ornaments on the top of her hood, so like flowers and ornaments, and I didn't draw those in yet. So I hope I can be a bit more, abstract with that. Now my initial layer was just a light wash of color, and you often see that people will lay down some water and let some different colors kind of seep into the areas to create some sort of base layer, and then they start to shape out the face or whatever features they want to shape out. For me, I already didn't like the color of the hood seeping into the face, so I just have to make my layers dry before I want to add a darker color. So I use a blow dryer often to speed up the process a little bit, but I definitely had to wait for my face to dry before I started on the hood, because I already knew the hood was going to be quite a dark color. I'm using a big brush because this way I don't get caught up in details right away. And with that same big brush I will add, just some dashes of color on top of her hood, maybe some abstract shapes that maybe will be flowers. I didn't plan this out, as I mentioned before, so I was kind of surprised to see what would come out of it. And same with the colors, I did not anticipate I would be using such an orangey color for the inside of the hood and the flowers on the top. I decided to make the background a bit darker so she would pop a little bit more. And so far I feel like, besides not having the initial wash be very loose, I felt I was leaving things a bit more to chance than I would normally. Now I'm also going to be using some gouache paint. So far it's all been watercolor, and I think gouache and watercolor, they have the perfect marriage of watercolor being translucent and gouache being much more opaque, so I can cover mistakes. Now for the line art I'm using acrylic ink. I typically use a mixture of quinacridone magenta with a little bit of India ink to create a wine color. I've talked about this before if you've seen previous videos, but this is basically my staple color for line art if I'm not using black. I think it goes with skin colors very nicely and with other colors that I like to use. I'm using a small brush, and it's always a struggle kind of to do a line art this way. It's very prone to mistakes, at least for me, because I don't have the best brush control yet, but I do feel I'm getting better the more I do it, so it definitely takes a lot of practice. I don't think it's the easiest way to line either, because it's kind of hard on the hands, and with the mistakes that you can easily make, it's not the least stressful thing I can do, but somehow it still is a very nice process, and it kind of feels, I don't know, you feel like a wizard if you're dipping or your brushes in ink. For the final details I always like to use a white gel pen or a Posca pen. It's great for rim lights and highlights, and I often cover mistakes with these pens, so they are definitely super convenient. I also have the Copic multi-liners in a similar wine color, so if I ever want to have some tiny details I will usually grab those pens instead of using the brush and ink, because it's just a bit hard to control having very small details. So that's about it for my talk for today. I'll meet you at the end and say goodbye. So do I think this more experimental approach was successful? Well, probably you wouldn't even notice the difference. I think more like in the process of art making, I think for me it was a bit different, and I guess the background and the hood, I think there I was successful in being a bit more impulsive. The face I think is more of my usual style, but I quite like how they turn out together. Like it sort of goes together, and hopefully like maybe in my sketchbook I can be a bit more experimental and explore this idea a little bit more. Like now I wanted to create a refined finished piece, so that's not very helpful. But I do like how it turned out, even though I'm still kind of playing it safe. Also, thank you so much for leaving such sweet comments on my previous videos. Because I know I keep saying like, oh yeah, I'm gonna post a lot of videos, and I have been filming a lot, and I hope I can speed up the process of editing and mostly of doing these voiceovers because I dread them so much. But thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!